So we are back live from Murnau in the south of Germany, wherever you are listening from. We're back with our Neuro Thursday. But before we go into some anatomical, physiological aspects, etc., I want to talk about my grandmother, because she just died very recently, just a couple of days ago. And of course, it's a very sad situation, but on the other hand, she had to live to 102. So 102 years on this planet. Wow, what a long time. And why do I mention her here on Neuro Thursday? Because I wouldn't be here if she hadn't been, because she was the one that told me that I should look at Dr. Phillips, my teacher, back in 2003. I should have a look at what he does, because he did things his own way, a different way. So what is this different way? And at this point, of course, I want to thank my grandmother for showing me that and opening me up to that, and that's why I'm here right now doing this, what I'm doing with functional neurology. So what's the big thing? I think the main issue, and this was when I went to New Zealand in 2003 to learn, to go into the first seminar with Dr. Phillips. I came from, I just finished, not just finished, I finished studying medicine in '99. So I had my exam and I did some stuff, and I gathered some experience, a little bit of osteopathy, manual therapy. Well, not a little bit of osteopathy. I did osteopathic training, also in Philadelphia in the United States. And there, of course, already we were talking more about physiology, so not so much pathology. So studying medicine, the first 2 years you study physiology, physics, anatomy, all these things. And of course that is maybe the most important part of studying. And after that, all the other years it's pathology. So you have this and you have to classify disease. And of course that's necessary, especially for infections. So you have some kind of infection, you have to classify to find out the right treatment for the disease. But a lot of things are not diseases. They're not a sickness by itself that can be defined by a certain thing besides symptoms. But what is more important is what is the physiology behind it that went wrong, causing the disease. So it's not a disease, it's dysfunction. So that's what we're talking about all the time. So dysfunction is a dysfunction of physiology. So that was one of the main aspects when I went to New Zealand, due to my grandmother. And here's Dr. Phillips mostly talking about physiology. So we're talking about motor function, we're talking about hormones, we're talking about the immune system, which gland is doing what, and all these things. And then we're talking about how can we make the function of all these systems better, looking at it from a neurological perspective. So that was the absolute main thing for me to say, well, yeah, that's it. That's what I was looking for. That's what I was looking for all the time. I didn't want to just sit there, have a patient come in, tell me his symptoms, and then classify his disease by the symptoms he has, and then maybe give him something that would just alter the symptoms. I didn't want to really do that. So I was looking for alternatives. And yes, manual therapy and osteopathy have part of that, but that was just like one part, mostly bones, mostly ligaments and structures like that. And here I had the system that Dr. Phillips was teaching me. Neurological integration system is what it used to be called back then. It still is. So that was my foundation where I came from, looking at physiology and trying to find out how can I test the altered physiology, and how can I change the physiology. So what we've gone through so far, and this is episode 10 of Neuro Thursday. So if you were joining us here for the first time, you might want to go back. We have all the videos on Instagram TV, and we have also all the videos, not all of them yet, but up to episode 8 on our channel on YouTube, Neurolog Academy TV. So you can look those up, and we're kind of going through what I'm saying now is going through peripheral receptor function, nerve functions, so the cable, checking if the cable is working right, thinking about stuff that's going on in the spinal cord, so integration processes, mainly on a sensory motor level. We were talking about the brain stem. Theoretically, we also looked at some testing to the brain stem or with the brain stem. And last time we talked about the main aspects of the midbrain structures. In midbrain, we talk about midbrain above the brain stem and below the cortex. So it's basal ganglia, hippocampus, amygdala, all these structures. And I want to look at one part of that again, more of a motor aspect. And what I want to say at this point again is that, of course, with the contacts we use, I'm often asked, well, how do you know that this contact represents that part of the brain? Well, we really don't know that. We can only assume it by looking at the function that's going wrong, and maybe we can not always be sure, is it a motor function or is it an autonomic function that's going wrong? But like if somebody comes in and says, well, when I move my joint, it hurts right away, I would think more of a motor function, and then you start thinking about sensory motor loops going through the hand, through the arm, through the spinal cord, through the brain stem and the midbrain areas, and of course the cortex areas. And when somebody says, I have no problem moving my joint like this, but when I move it like for half an hour, it starts hurting, my muscles start hurting, maybe that's more of an autonomic problem. So now you have a problem of vascular supply, of oxygen supply, something like that. So that would be maybe more autonomic. But of course, that's not always the way it is. It's just an interpretation of what the patient is telling you. So, but then when we test, and that's also what I always have said in the past, and I'm saying that again, is that we're looking for either function or a tract, a nervous tract going from that spot of dysfunction to a part of the brain. So, and then we look for brain areas that correlate or that show dysfunctional connection to that part of the body. So that's basically what we're doing. So we're looking at function, we're looking at pathways, and we're going to treat that. And you can treat a function or you can treat a pathway. It's both options there. So that's the way we do it. And it's basically very simple. The complex part is knowing all the pathways and knowing how can I test these different pathways, because sometimes I have to be very specific about testing which stimulus do I use to test the function of the nervous system at that point. So what we're doing is not talking about content, and that's a very important aspect for me. So people coming into my practice and they're saying, well, I was told I have to kind of, when I have back pain, I have to kind of tilt my pelvis and I have to walk like this and I have to externally rotate my hips a little bit and all these things. I say, well, how can you walk then? You can't walk that way and think of something else like shopping. You will forget everything you need to shop, because while you're going through the supermarket, you're thinking about tilting your pelvis, not thinking about buying eggs and butter or something like that. So that just doesn't work to me, and that's, I think, the not a very good approach, because all the way the body moves should be programmed into the system or should be learned by the system. Of course, I could have an error learning and then I have to relearn something, then I have to go through that process. That might also occur in rehabilitation, so I'm not saying that's completely wrong doing it that way, but before we think, and I'm saying especially we, not you, before we think about content, we think just about connections. So what's the difference? Well, I'm not seeing anybody, but I'm talking to some people out there somewhere. I don't know where you guys are at here in my town, or are you inside in Germany? Are you somewhere in the world watching me now? And this is only possible because we have a connection through the system, through the internet. So of course I have a wireless system here, but that's going into a socket through a LAN cable, and that could be a disconnection in the cable. So when something goes wrong, if you guys don't hear me or see me, this could be due to, and I have to check, yes, this could be due to, and I'm back here, this could be due to a dysfunction in the cable, but probably not because of a dysfunction of what I'm saying. So if I'm talking loud or or not that loud, or if I'm saying weird things, complicated things, it's not because of that the cable's not working. It's because the cable is not well connected. So what I have to do, if somebody couldn't hear me or somebody couldn't see me, first thing I would have to do is check the connections in the cables, and there it might be. Like you have in your practice or in your office, the printer's not working. Well, it might not be the software of the printer or something. It might be very simple that just the cable has gone a little bit loose because somebody bumped against it, and there it is, not working anymore. So that's the first thing we think about. It's just connection. It's not content. It's not what's going through the cable. It's just the cable connecting two parts of the system. For example, a muscle or a joint, ligaments, tendons, fascia, with parts of the nervous system, central nervous system, spinal cord, brainstem, etc. So that's what makes it so easy. The basic steps makes them so easy. And if you want to have a look at it very soon, I don't know exactly when, but we're just working on that. Probably next week we'll finish it. We'll have all the videos and the manual of our foundation course. So course number 1 for free. On YouTube and probably also on our website. So I'll get you an info out on Instagram or Zoom, Facebook, etc. So you can look at that. We're just getting that ready to get that out there. And then you can see the very basic treatment approach, which is super simple because first of all, it's just about connecting different parts of the body. It's not about what this part of the body should do. Should it internally rotate, externally rotate? Is there more inhibition or facilitation in the muscle, whatever? No, it's just about, okay, A needs to talk to B, and they need to connect. And we talked about the way they connect. It's a synchronization process in the nervous system. So that's what this is all about. So that's why it's so simple. And very often in seminars, people don't believe it's that simple. And they treat each other and they see, okay, now the hips have turned by themselves and the walking pattern has changed and the upright position of the spine has changed and all these things, and hopefully the symptom also has changed. And sometimes you just integrate 2, 3, 4 things and there it is. The symptoms are much less, etc. So, and then all it is, the complexity is more in how many connections are there. So there's quite a few connections when you go into more detail. So that's what we have to think about and what we have to consider when we talk about neurofunctional integration or functional integration or neurological integration, however you want to call it. It's just connecting A and B. And what I'm going to show today may be, hopefully, my son has some dysfunction. I shouldn't say that, but I'm saying that. I hope he has some dysfunction so we can show you something. We just had the same thing in German, and yes, he had some dysfunction. I'll find something because he does sports, he plays football, so he falls, he hits his head, he trips. So it's always something that's not working really good. So we'll check that out. And he broke both of his arms. This one and right and left. Okay, so we just fixed his left arm. That was not too long ago. Well, already 2 years. Family is always the least treated, at least in my house. Okay, I'm starting to say bad things here. So I'm going to say hello to everybody watching me. Thanks for being here. Thanks for stopping by. And yes, we will have seminar course 1 available soon, and I'll let you know. So. Let's go back to some basic aspects of what we were talking about last time, and I want to talk about one thing. First of all, I need my pen here, and I'm just going to draw the hip hypothalamus. So HT hypothalamus is what we want to talk about, and there's a part of that, the subthalamic locomotor region. SLR is like hooked up to or close to the hypothalamus. I mean, hypothalamus is just a bunch of nuclei, so this is a part of that area in the brain. So what this is as it says, subthalamic locomotor region, it's making the body move. So it's going to the muscle, it's an output to the motor system, and it has the same motor neuron than the other output systems. So why I'm talking about this today is because I had a long experimental phase, I want to say, in my practice, and I was looking at patients, I was looking at function, and I was looking for cables, I was looking for pathways that would explain that dysfunction I was looking at. And so I was working a lot with the motor system. Of course, joints, people fall, they sprain their ankle, they fall on their hands and all these things. So you test, and you would expect, yes, you want to find cerebellum, you want to find parts of the brain stem, you want to find motor areas in the brain maybe are disconnected to the periphery. And yes, you would find that, but then still the function would not maybe regulate the way you think it should. And then I kept looking and looking and looking for connection. I kept going back to this area. Well, of course, I have to explain how can I get back to this area testing. Well, I learned in my training that putting the tongue on the roof of the mouth has a correlation to basal brain areas like the hypothalamus. So this is just an experience, it's just a thought, this is just an observation. So we don't know, there's no MRI scan showing that. So that's a question that comes up a lot. Well, how do you know? Do you have any proof for that? No, we do not have proof, it's just observations. Like they used to observe in acupuncture, and they drew the meridians on there, and maybe there is no meridians, but now we know that the observation correlates pretty good what neuroanatomy is telling us. So probably acupuncture is just applied neuroanatomy, and this is probably what this is, and maybe at some point we'll find out that this is true. Anyway, so I was looking for areas to connect peripheral systems to, and I ended up with the tongue on the roof of the mouth a lot. And I didn't understand that, considering or thinking this would be a hypothalamic area, because I had no real memory of what I've learned, that locomotion is also coming from the hypothalamus. So I started researching, and here it is, a paper, I don't know his name, Takashi something, it's a Japanese paper about the sensory motor system, or the motor system, and here he describes two motor systems, the dorsal and the ventral motor system, the dorsal being the one coming from the visual system, going to the motor system, and then going down the pathways we know and we have in the textbooks. Of course, here already all the bigger view of it, including the eyes and the vestibular system, all that going into locomotion, and not only saying, well, the motor system is motor cortex and then going down and some basal ganglia and cerebellum networks, and then going onto the motor neuron. So this paper was describing the ventral motor system, also called, or they call it the emotional motor system. I think that term emotion is always a little not the best to use, but it's different, or a second motor system. So what does it supply with? First of all, you have a whole bunch of systems or behaviors in here, behavior systems that would elicit explicit behaviors once they're stimulated. So there's a very good book on this, and I don't know if I have it here. It could be here, but I'm not sure. I can't see it right away, so it might not be here. So it's called Affective Neuroscience. It's Jaak Panksepp. He described very well, in very much detail, when you go into certain parts of the hypothalamus, if you stimulate that with an electrode, the animals will show a very distinct behavior like seeking. So very interesting study done also in that terms. They took a rat, they decerebrated the rat, so they took the cortex off, which of course is not very nice to do, but that's what experiments are for. And they put that rat in a cage with a rat that has the cortex, and then they showed that to students, and they said, well, which one is the one with the cortex and which one doesn't have the cortex? And interestingly, the students thought that the decerebrated rat was the healthy rat because it showed more movement. So there you could see that you don't really need a cortex to move. You just need a hypothalamus to show basic behaviors, and that's of course is a motor aspect behavior, showing an explicit behavior. So what doesn't work, and that was an experiment with cats, a cat can walk on the floor if you take off the cortex, but a cat cannot walk on a fence if you take off the cortex, because that takes a lot of visual vestibular adjustments, so that's not possible. Basic movements, yes. Complex movement, no. So that's what we learn about those basic things, basic behavior systems in hypothalamus. But then, of course, you have input, and we talked about the amygdala and the hippocampus. The amygdala giving out through the stria terminalis, and the hippocampus going through the fornix. It's a little bit of different output, so I'm not putting that in the same spot, but they go in hypothalamic regions, and then they create muscle output. And what does that give you? It gives you evaluation. So is the scenery I'm in right now, is that dangerous or threatening? And it gives you, of course, memory. So, I've experienced this before. So I was just giving this example. I'm walking through the house at night and I step on something pointy. It could be a piece of glass. It could be something really hurts. So if I go out the next night, I'm walking in the dark, I will walk differently because I might expect to hit something again that makes me hurt. So that's going to change my motor output because I'm going to be more careful. So I'm putting on the brakes. So this is what's happening here. We're having memory coming into that. Also anticipation, what could happen in the future, but that's basically memory projecting itself into what could happen next, or what could happen if I don't pay attention, things like that. So, what this I already talked about last time is very important to consider, because nothing I do right now is purely what I do or perceive right now. Also my perception, the video camera, the monitor, all these things, I've seen that 100 times before. So my brain is using that old information to feed also the new information, basically looking for unexpected change. Oh, there was 2 monitors there, now there's only 1. That's different than last time I was here. So no, that's not true, but I'm just saying that could be true. Okay, so we actually don't know, we don't have any numbers, or haven't found any numbers yet, how much of the past experience is going to go into my present experience. But the fact is, everything I experience right now is a mixture of my experience right now and a mixture of my experience in the past. So I have to consider the past. So how do I do that? When somebody comes in with a trauma or an operation, something like that, I always go back to the trauma. So because he might have stored information about what happened, maybe that was really bad. Maybe they twisted their knee so bad and it made a loud popping sound when something broke or ripped, and then they were afraid because they were all alone, and maybe they were the last one out skiing or something like that. So this all plays a role in how the patient will behave afterwards and how he will experience pain. And it could be that he's only experiencing pain because of fear or the fear he experienced. So this for me is very important. I can't just go to the knee. I have to look at the knee. I have to look at the ligaments, the tendons. I have to look at the vascular system, the lymphatic system. I have to look at all these systems and see if the peripheral function is there. But I have to go to the central system, because that's always going to feed into the motor system when that person is walking or moving. So this is part of what's needed. And then I understood back then when I did all the testing, and I always came back to midbrain areas the way we test. Now through that scientific research, I understand why this is part of motor function in the body. So, and there's different ways of testing that. So I'm just going to show you some very basic ways of testing that. And that's why I have my son here with me today, again, to show you practical application of functional testing. So here's Maxi. Like I said, plays soccer, rides his bicycle, rides his bicycle on a rock, falls on his arm, breaks his arm. So that's what happens to kids. Or he was playing soccer. That was a couple of years earlier. He was playing soccer. He tripped and fell on his arm, and he broke his right arm. So right arm broken, left arm broken. It could be very well that there's some kind of a neuronal pathway that we can still test in terms of that, especially because my family is not really the family I probably treat more my patients than my family. I'm sorry for that. Okay. So let's go. Let's just test. So we test muscle function, and there's always criticism, or I hear criticisms again and again about muscle function. Well, what does it tell you? Say, well, it tells you something, but it doesn't tell you everything. Of course, that is true. It doesn't tell you everything. So here I might just test this arm, and I might just test the muscle. Okay, so the muscle, he can contract his muscles. So there is an output signal going from his brain to his body, and he's saying, I want to contract. I want a contraction, and it does contract. So what I'm testing next is I'm testing inhibition. So I'm going to the spindles, and I'm just going on the muscle spindles on his biceps muscle, okay, and then hold okay, and the muscle will just inhibit. And that's normal. It should do that. So whenever somebody does muscle testing, and we're not doing muscle testing, say, this is connected to the stomach, so he has a problem in the stomach. That could be, yes, that could be some correlation to that. But first of all, it's a muscle dysfunction right here. And strong muscle, weak muscle, that's not all there is. It could be strong, saying, wow, that's a really strong muscle, but a muscle has to have the ability to inhibit. So if it doesn't inhibit, that's a problem. I just had a patient, he fell on his shoulder, so a year later he comes to see me because his shoulder is not getting better. So all the muscles were working fine if you just test the strength, no problem. But when we started testing the inhibition patterns, almost all of the muscles were not able to inhibit. So that's a different pathway. So one is an efferent pathway, the other one is an afferent pathway. So he had a problem in his afferents, probably to his cerebellum, because that's where muscle spindles go to. So very important aspect to test that. So that's fine, okay? So let's test something else. So I'm going to test internal rotation, okay? So he internally rotates, that's the subscapularis muscle, so that's fine, okay? So I'm not going to go there and inhibit his muscle right now. I'm just going to show you integrated muscle function. We're going to be talking more about that because that's what I think is one of the most important aspects, and I don't know how many people are really doing that. They're muscle testing, well, that's very isolated, that's fine, should work. Inhibition, well, you should add that, but then integrated muscle function. What does that mean? How does the muscle behave in terms of maybe like turning the head, okay? So usually when I go out and work, I kind of use my hands and my head in the same way. I'm not going like this in my everyday life, it could be, but I'm more like synchronizing my head and hand movements, okay? So when I test his muscle, okay, and he turns his head to the left, all right? So now the hand would be going in the same direction and the muscle is still staying strong. Now he turns the head to the other side and I take his muscle and now his muscle is weakening. That's normal, that's physiological, that should happen. So I always need to test for integrated muscle function in terms of coordinated movement. You can also say that. That's very spinal cord, okay? So that's probably where most of these reflexes, these movement patterns are stored in the spinal cord. So that's for me a classical spinal cord testing that has not, as far as we understand, so much to do with the brain, but there's again experiments showing if you take away the, I think the posterior parietal cortex of the cat, there's certain reflexes that are not going to work anymore. So you can never simplify it too much. It's always going to be kind of wrong because it's just such an interconnected system. Okay, so muscle strength, muscle inhibition, integrated muscle function. Okay, so that's an example for that. So then the next step would be like also kind of an integrated muscle function. Like I would say, okay, let's test your shoulder strength. Okay, so shoulder muscle is just there to move the hand somewhere. So that's the tool you have, and you want to move your hand somewhere. Okay, so let's let him just move his fingers, okay, and stop and hold strong. So that doesn't change any output in his shoulder. Okay, let's let him move his joint here. So he's now going to move his joint here. Okay, and stop and hold very strong. Okay, no problem there. Let's start using the elbow. So just twist this back and forth. You have some elbow movement. Just go like this, back and forth. So also some shoulder movements already. Okay, we could also do it like this. Then we have no shoulder movement. Just twist back and forth like that. Okay, and hold very strong. Okay, so no problem right there. Okay, so let's try flexion extension. So he's just going to flex and extend. So you understand this is already more complicated than just testing flexors or extensors. Okay, and hold very strong. So there's an output problem right there. Once he starts using extensor flexor muscles, his output into the shoulder is inhibited. So that shouldn't happen. Let's try it on this side. Of course, he also fell on that arm. He also broke that arm. Okay, so hold very strong. So nothing's happening here. So there's no muscle inhibition going on in the shoulder when he flexes and extends his elbow, but that happens on this side. So this is functional testing. So I'm testing, he's doing a function, and then I'm testing muscle output, and if that changes, that's a hint to say, well, there's a problem and that you can find a solution to. So now what I'm looking for is, and I'm assuming it's the joint. It could also be the muscle, of course. So I have to be careful on that. I'm going to take his arm and just just touch it. Just touch his elbow, okay? So hold your arm, touch the elbow, sensory input, nothing is happening. So now we can go through the pathways. So moving this arm is mostly a function here, a conscious function of the cortex. So I'm putting my hand here and I'm putting my hand up here. So hold very strong. So there's nothing happening right here. So there, somebody might think already, well, why putting on the head on the skull is going to have something to do with this motor function? Well, it does, because I have 18 years of experience testing all these things. Why is maybe the question that has an interference. I assume it's electromagnetic, because I can use my hand and I can use a magnet. I don't have a magnet here right now, but I can use my hand or a magnet. That would work. What I cannot use, I can't just touch. So here we have our famous chopstick test. So just some regular Chinese chopsticks. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is do the same thing. I'm going to touch right here, and I'm going to touch right up here with my chopsticks. And usually nothing happens, because it has nothing to do with just touching here. It has something to do with interference. And the brain is an electrical system. It's got electromagnetic fields. That's what we measure when we measure EEG. You can also measure the magnetoencephalogram. You can use that to measure the magnetic fields. And that's probably the interference that's happening with the hand if something happens to the muscle function. Okay? So also transcranial magnetic stimulation, electromagnetic stimulation, which is used in therapy. So something like that. And as I said, usually you can instead of using a hand, you can use a magnet going to the part of the head, and causing perturbation. Okay, so nothing going on there. So let's try this pathway right here. Okay, so now we're with this pathway right here, and what that would mean in the system we work in, that would mean that he has to put his tongue on the roof of the mouth. Oh, and like I said, there is absolutely no proof that that has something directly to do with that, but it's just an observation. It's an observation, it's an experience that we think, that we believe that because there's nothing going on here, and we haven't tested other areas like the cerebellum and stuff like that, as far as we can test them here, this part might react, and it has reacted so many times in the past in correlation to motor function. So that's why I'm assuming, due to the anatomy and the physiology, that this could be the reason why, because we have a locomotor system in the hypothalamus area. So he has the tongue just on the roof of this mouth. A little further back, there you go. And then just relax your head and your jaw, okay, and your lips. So the tongue is just touching the roof of the mouth. Now I'm just touching the joint, and hold very strong. Okay, so unfortunately we have nothing there too. So now we have to keep searching the area. So what comes next maybe? And I'm just going to say hello. So what could come next? Cerebellum. Okay, so cerebellum is just touching the back of the head, and you will be able to look at all these contact points as soon as we have the manual out for you to look at. And of course, it's all for free, but nothing is for free. So if you want to sometimes join us for a seminar, then of course you would have to pay for it later on, afterwards. Okay, so just so you're warned. Okay. So I'm touching the back of his head. So the mid part, the lower part of his occiput is where his cerebellum actually sits, and that is could be correlated. And of course, we always have to be careful in the interpretation. While I'm also touching neck muscles, so maybe it has to do with the neck muscles. Yes, it could. So let's try that. That's the biggest proprioceptive ganglion. Hold very strong. Okay, so nothing's happening there. Now we go to the spinal cord. Okay, so this part of the elbow is maybe like C5, C6. Yeah, so I'm kind of at the lower part of the spinal cord, touching his arm. Hold very strong, and there it goes. Okay, so this is not what we're looking for, but that's how it is. I can't just make that up. This is how it is. If I touch his spinal cord only, or not his spinal cord, his spine only, I'm just touching the back of his spine only. I'm not doing anything on the elbow in terms of touching the elbow, only if I connect those two. And that's the thing, connection. Okay, one more time, all right? So I'm not trying to fake this. Muscle tests critics always say, well, you're just pushing stronger or less strong. Well, why would I want to do that? That would be kind of stupid, trying to betray the patient. Okay, I'm just trying to help the patient. That's my intention. It should be everybody's intention working in this field. Okay, so one more time. Hold very strong. So nothing's happening. I just touched the elbow. Hold very strong. Nothing's happening. I touch the spine, hold very strong. Nothing's happening. I touch the elbow and the spine, hold very strong. And there's more inhibition, okay? So it's not completely inhibited, it's just changing. It's just a change in reaction. That's what we're looking for, okay? So there's no like, oh, this is very strong and then it's very weak. It's just, okay, it's strong, strong, strong. Oh, it gets weaker, okay? So that's a change in reaction that has to mean something, okay? So to us, this change in reaction means he has a connection problem, so he's too easily disturbed, okay? So what I'm doing actually, I'm kind of disturbing his internal system, his self-organization. That's what I'm doing, and that should not happen just by touching 2 points of the brain saying, I'm confused now, so I can't deal with that. Okay, so here we go with a very simple integration. It's just, and what did we have before? Was it twisting? I think it was twisting. It was twisting, okay? So let's go back to twisting. So you twist your arm again, you twist your arm, you stretch out your arm, and you hold very strong. No, it was not twisting, it was this. Oh, yeah, it was this extension, flexion. So body can't be fooled. That was strong, and hold very strong. Okay, there we go again. It's going weak again. Okay, so all we're doing now is we're going here. Okay, and I'm going to show this from the back. We're just going. I'm just touching his elbow. I'm just stimulating his lower spine a little bit, and I'm completing the integration with just going on the skull. So I'm just doing this. It's 3 contacts. Okay, just some input here. And it has to be, you can't go like this, then think for 2 minutes, then go here, think again, and do this. It's not going to get connected because connection is a time issue, okay? So it's a time thing. So I'm just doing that together, all right? So this is the most simple form of integration. It just means connecting points, and the integration up here is just an observation over 30 years that works pretty good just to get cables integrated in a very basic way, okay? So let's test again. He goes like this. He's gonna move his arm back and forth, okay, and hold very strong. So there's much less or no inhibition now left when he moves his arm. So it has changed just by connecting. So I'm not thinking about extension, flexion, okay? So I have to watch my words here. I'm not thinking about that. I'm not thinking about, well, what is the arm doing, externally rotating, internally rotating, what's the shoulder doing? Don't care about that. He's just applying some output onto his arm, into his elbow. And we checked for the cable, for the pathway. We integrated the pathway. We kind of activated the pathway. You might not want to say integrate, activated the pathway. We stimulated the pathway. So we stimulated the pathway from the elbow to the spinal cord. That's what we did. Okay? So by integrating that, and that will hold. This will not go away. It's not going to be like he walks out the door and it comes back. That's what I had very often in osteopathic treatments. I would, adjust the pelvis. The patient gets up, walks, pelvis back to where it was, because we did not consider neurological aspects. Considering neurological aspects works much better in a long-term scale. So this is not going to come back unless he goes out, slips on the ice. Well, we don't have any ice out right now. Slips on the ice, or slips, falls on his elbow. There can get blow the fuse again. Let's say it that way. Can blow the fuse again. Okay, so let's go the other way. Let's go the other way and try to find if, because he fell on his arm and broke his arm a couple of years ago already, we're going to look from this point of view. Okay, so now we're taking this part of the brain by putting the tongue on the roof of his mouth. Okay, relax your head, relax your lip, just touch the roof of your mouth, and just going to see if that's going to do something here. Okay, and then we're just going to start stimulating like the whole axis here. So we're just going through the joints right now. So it's not only joints. Okay, little bit, but not much. So that's interesting. Before there was nothing. On his hand, on his fingers. So you have the tongue. Yeah. Okay. Fingers, nothing really there. So unfortunately, not really something going on in this pathway. Okay, so now we can, I didn't go to the spine. Okay, so if you fall on your hand, you might also hurt your spine, or you might also affect your spine. So tongue, relax your lips. Okay, hold very strong. Okay, just touching that back there a little bit, hold very strong. Okay, no, not really. So, okay, so no pathway on that side. So we still have this arm. We fixed already part of this this arm right here. So we just move down this arm. So I already did this, so I can just go to the shoulder. And what I did not do any like muscle or fascia yet. So this is just like joint areas. Okay. Tongue is on the roof of your mouth. Okay. So let go of your hand. So just walking through all the different segments, you could say. Hold very strong. No, not really. Okay, so nothing there to look at. So we only looked at joints. Now we're going to look more for like muscle. Of course, if I go here, I have muscle, but here, if I leave this spot, I might have a problem in his muscles. So that's where we're going to go. We're going to go back to this and go into the parts in between the joints. I think a lot of people still think that joints are like the most important proprioceptor systems. No, it's not. It's the muscle, and it's the fascia. So that's what we need to consider probably even more than joints. Or at least we cannot leave it out. We can't just focus on joints. So that was kind of the thing that somewhat irritated me when we did like manual therapy. All we did was mobilize joints, pop joints, all this stuff. And yes, part of it, but not all of it. Okay, tongue. Okay. Yeah, good. So here we are with the muscle. Here we are more in the muscle. Okay, nothing on this side. Okay, so there something is showing up on the other side, okay? So take your tongue away, all right? So I'm just going to go back because it could be that I'm just by squeezing his fascia here, something's happening. Not really, okay? Put the tongue back on the roof of your mouth, and this is the connection thing again, okay? So it's about a pathway, okay? It's not only about a single system. Could very well be that if you apply a certain type of stimulation to the tissue, skin, fascia, etc., down all the way to the bone, that this alone could react. But you cannot treat this just by squeezing and tapping. It doesn't really work for whatever reason that is, okay? So that's why we have to have at least two things we can connect so for it to work really well. So we could go and just go tongue on the roof of the mouth, squeeze the muscle to get the proprioception going and integrate that. We could do that, but we're not going to do that here because there's another way of integrating, which is a more complex way of integrating, is adding something on top of that to offer a solution to the nervous system. So we're in a pathway from the, we think, hypothalamus, so basal brain areas down to his arm. So of course this is tissue, this is muscle, this has autonomic function, blood flow, metabolism, all these things going on here. Still, I would think that this part that we're playing with now is more of a sensory motor aspect than a autonomic aspect, if we're at all able to separate it from that. So there's a lot of studies showing that there's autonomic pathways coming from the, bless you, autonomic pathways coming from the motor system directly. So there's autonomic pathways coming from the motor cortex to the adrenal glands. So that's interesting. So we have to be very careful with saying, well, that's definitely sensory motor, not autonomic. Probably more sensory motor than autonomic. Maybe we can say it like that. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're just going to add something in between. Okay, so I'm going to add this, okay, so because that's on in between. I'm just going to stimulate something in between. It's not always something in between that needs to be stimulated, but we can try that. Very often that works. So we have the arm, we have the muscle of the upper arm. I'm going to activate the spinal system, and he has the tongue on the roof as well. So we're going to do this, we're going to do that, and he has the tongue there. And this already changes the way this circuitry is working, okay? Going back. So tongue on the roof of the mouth, I'm activating this. So here the system inhibits. If I add some stimulation to his spinal cord, so there it already goes better. And that is something we can, of course, integrate. The tongue is on the roof of the mouth. Okay, relax. The tongue is on the roof of the mouth. So this is what it would look like, stimulating that pathway. So he's saying, ouch, because I'm pushing too hard. Yes, my poor son. Okay, so
I think I'm gonna cry.
Yeah, go ahead and cry, that's fine. Okay, keep the tongue on the roof of the mouth. So I integrated that way too often anyways. Okay, so we can stop. All right, so just stimulating that circuitry. That's what we're basically doing. It's not always possible to stimulate that circuitry within the circuitry. So sometimes you have to go outside of the circuitry. So you have to go somewhere completely else to do that. Sometimes it just works as simple as that. So that's the other way, not integrating inhibition, but integrating facilitation. That's basically what it is. So it's another, I always say, I'm giving the brain a solution. And the interesting thing is, if I do it that way, there's less reaction in terms of things getting better during regulation. So in the beginning, when I just integrated 2 points from all the different body systems, people would sometimes react very, very strongly to those stimulations. So there's a lot of autonomic reactions, or pain is coming up, or movement disorders coming up for maybe a day or 2 or 3. And you giving the body or the brain already a solution, saying, well, if I stimulate that, it's going to get better. That takes away a lot of those regulation processes that are going on afterwards. So we're integrating that. Oh, we did already integrate that. Okay. So we're testing. So the tongue is on the roof of the mouth. Okay, relax. Okay, going back to the muscle, and there we cannot inhibit the muscle anymore by activating that pathway. Okay, so very simple, but still very effective. Like I said, printer's not working. Very simple, just to unplug the cable and plug it back in, right? It's very simple, and there again, oops, surprise, the printer's working again. So you don't have to reprogram the printer. You don't have to take it apart and get all the screws and all the things out and back in. All you have to do is plug out and plug back in. So that's how electricity works. Okay, so, and this is about, I believe, functional connectivity. And functional connectivity should be something very simple for the body, but sometimes it's lacking some information or the ability to do that. So that's what we're basically doing, saying we're helping the system to get functional connectivity going again. That's probably what we're doing. I cannot explain it in any other way, why I see all these great results with just such a simple technique. So we're done. We're done. Yes, it's 9:15. I thank you so much for watching. We'll be back. So who's here? Yes, hello. Hello, and thanks for being with us. I'm going to say bye-bye, and we'll be back in 2 weeks. This was, for all people that are on Zoom, this was our last date, but we're going to change that. We're going to put more dates out there. We're just going to continue every 2 weeks to get some information on functional neurology out there. Bye, and see you next time.